Jeff Spencer, and I'm working with DeltaBahn to bring this webinar series to our crowd. And I want to go ahead and turn it over to Reed McTaggart. Reed is a principal partner at DeltaBahn, and he's going to take us through a set of content on how to create project site templates inside of Project Server 2010. Reed, would you like to go ahead and get started?
Sure. Thank you, Jeff. Do you want to say anything about Q&A? I think we're going to handle that on raise your hand or send in questions. Is that right?
You might be on mute. We can't hear you. But so as he's coming on, I want to remind everybody there is a question and answer section of the webinar product, and we'll be taking questions at the end. So if you have questions as Reed is going through his content, please put them in and we'll answer those at the end. The ones that we don't get to, we will send out emails to you to answer those questions, so we make sure we answer everything. So Reed, over to you.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, Reed, I can hear you fine.
Okay, very good. Very good. Glad to hear that. Thank you, Jeff. Hope you can hear me okay, and hope everyone in the audience can as well. Good morning, everyone, and especially to those on the West Coast, thank you for joining at this early hour. Jeff, can you mute your microphone, please? We're hearing a little bit of scuffling there. Okay, so today's presentation is about really how to create your own or modify your own Microsoft project site templates in Project Server 2010. It's not about how to make beautiful and compelling project site templates. Really, it's a technical session. So what are we going to cover? Let's see if I can get a page down to happen here. There we go. Okay. First of all, just a tiny bit about our company. You can read the slide. I'm not going to drag you through all of this, but we're a Microsoft partner that specializes in implementing Microsoft Project Server for clients in a number of industries. We've listed just a few of the industries below. I know that some of our attendees are in other industries than are listed below, and I thank you all for joining. We have done a lot of Project Server deployments. Have a great deal of experience going back to the very first edition of Microsoft Project Server and a little bit before that even as well. We do have MVPs and community contributors in our company. We're all certified 100% on Project and Project Server, as you might expect. So this is what we do. So today's session objectives, really we're going to see how to create and deploy and manage project sites, project site templates. And we're going to create a project from a template, or a new site from a template rather. We'll see how we can modify that site. We'll do a couple of things there just as examples. So this is not going to be a deep course on SharePoint, but everything we're doing is really SharePoint stuff. So this is where project and SharePoint meet. We're going to step over the line a little bit out of the project world and into the SharePoint world and see how we can modify those sites so that we can add, for example, a logo. We're going to be looking at custom lists especially. And that's because issues and risks are custom lists. And we'll play with a couple of other special custom lists that we're going to make and show just a little bit of functionality just to give you a peek of the sort of thing that's possible so that you might take it from there and see some possibilities of things that you can do to help your organization. And we'll see, of course, how to associate that template with an enterprise project type, because until you do that, your template doesn't do anything. It just lies there waiting for you to do something with it. And along the way, we're going to see how we can avoid some common mistakes, and also how we can use different templates for different enterprise project types, which is significant, as you might imagine. And it was a wish list item for many, many years that, well, one department wants to have a certain kind of site template, and another department wants to have a different type of site template. How do we both give them both what they want? Didn't used to be an easy thing at all, and now it's an easy thing. And finally, we'll see how we can do a little bit of cleanup to keep from getting overloaded with old, obsolete site templates. Okay. All right, so let's launch into a demonstration here. I'm going to switch over to my RDP connection here. And hopefully the screen refresh is keeping up with you. I'm not on the highest bandwidth connection, but we've tested this a few times, and so far it's worked, which means that we'll probably have a failure today, right? That's how these things go. Okay, so you should be seeing Project Web App home page right now, with which you're all very familiar. I will say, if it probably goes without saying, but the things I'm going to be showing you today, you do need administrative privileges to be able to do these things. Obviously, we don't want non-administrators to go in and mess up site templates that affect the entire organization. So if you don't have admin privileges, go ask for them, and then you can do this. Probably 90% of the people on here do have them, and the rest of you are probably just interested in knowing, well, what could I ask those nasty admins to go do for me, right? So here we go. So first thing I want to show you is the standard project site template that comes out of the box in Microsoft. I'm going to go to the Project Center, and I've created a little project here that uses the standard project site. So I'm going to select it and then click on Project Site. So this is just a set baseline out of the box. What you get is a project site template that looks exactly like this. It'll show welcome to your site. It'll have a nice project server logo over on the right. It'll have a few web parts here showing you deliverables, issues, and risks. And on the left side, it'll have a quick launch bar that looks like this with issues, risks, deliverables, calendar tasks, discussion items, and project document library. So this has worked very, very well for a lot of people, and most organizations just use this. And it's plenty good enough. But for some people, it's not quite good enough. So what we want to do is see, well, if we want to change this a little bit, you may have had people in your organization, or perhaps you yourself have had a project site like this, and you've changed it around, and you've said, you know, I wish that we could have this be a template to use for future project sites. All right? And so one of the first rules I want to tell you is that if you modify your own site and then ask somebody to use it as a template, it won't work. They do need to create their own template, but they could copy all your best ideas into the new template. But do not ever attempt to take an existing project site template and and build from it a new template. It will not work with all the future projects that you associate it with. Okay, so you basically have to start from scratch. But I'll show you how to not quite start from scratch as well, if you need to. So how do we create a new site template? Okay, the key thing that we're going to be seeing today is up in the upper left-hand corner in Project Web App, the button that says Site Actions. So Site Actions, think of this as our gateway or our doorway into SharePoint. Excuse me. So I click that, and I have a number of choices here. Looks a little bit daunting, but there's really only a couple of these that we're going to be looking at today. The one we're going to spend our most time in is called Site Settings, which is all the way at the bottom under Site Actions. But where we're going to go right now is a place called New Site. So New Site is when we want to create a site based on a template. Out of the box, we get one project site template. I'm going to scroll down this list here, and it's the one that's called Microsoft Project Site. All these other templates are lovely templates that can be used to create SharePoint sites, but only the one called Microsoft Project Site is built so that it will create SharePoint sites that can interact with your project schedule. And what I mean by that is you can probably see over here a little bit grayed out. In the Project Center, you may be accustomed to seeing issue and risk and document icons next to project schedules. So that's the special functionality that you get with the project site, as well as the ability to create issues or risks and assign them to people and have those assignments of issues or risks show up on that person's home page in Project Web App. So if you want to create a Microsoft Project Server project site, you want to start from this template. So I'll click on this template, and then I'm going to fill in a name over here. So let's give this a name that I'm going to be able to remember. You can call it whatever you like. I'm going to call it webinar _ Contoso. So those of you who have seen Microsoft demos before have seen that Contoso name a lot. That's our imaginary company. Okay. And we need to give it a URL as well. Well, I'm going to save a little bit of time here, and I'll just copy. I'm not sophisticated enough to have different URLs than names. I find it useful to have the name and the URL, but the same thing. Keeps me from getting confused. So I'm going to click Create button, And in just a few seconds, we will get a new site that pops up. All right, I'm getting a warning about network difficulties. Jeff, are you able to hear me? Or Brian?
Read, everything's coming across fine.
Either of you guys able to hear me?
Read, everything is coming across fine
very
on our
good.
side.
Very good. Thank you, Brian. Okay, so here we see a site, and this looks exactly like that site we saw before because they were both created from the Microsoft project template that came out of the box. But this is a site that is not connected to a Microsoft project. This is just a site that's sitting all by itself, so this can be used to create a template. And what I'm going to do now is modify this a little bit. So let's say, so let me go here and to the page button, and the page button, or tab rather, is what gives us, it's one of the two ways we can go and get permission to edit the page. The other way is under Site Actions, Edit Page. Okay, they both take you to the same place, which is to light up these buttons, for example, that allows to add a web part. Okay, so I'm going to add a web part to this page. In this case, I just want to put a banner across the front. I want to call out the top of this, the top of your screen right now. You're seeing a number of different categories of web parts. So these are things that we can add to SharePoint pages. Okay, I'm going to be doing media and content. I'll come back to that in a second. But I also want to call out of particular interest to a lot of people is going to be the Project Web Access web parts. So these are things that you recognize as things that you see in other areas of Project Web Access, or Project Web App now as it's called. And you can put these web parts into your project site page if you want. But I'm just going to go back up because I want to put in a banner. That's a graphical element. I'm going to put in media and content, and then I'm going to select Image Viewer, and I'll click Add. When I do that, it's going to have, excuse me, as the image viewer, and there's a link here that says Open the Tool Pane. I want to show you a different way to get to that because you only see this the first time. And if you come back and want to edit it later, you won't see this and you won't know what to do. So what you do is you mouse over to the right. You see a little drop-down arrow. And you click that and you click Edit Web Part. So that's the same thing as if I had clicked that link that says Open the Tool Pane. So the web part, the image viewer web part edit box appears on the left. And all that I really want to do here is just put in a URL that links to an image that I want to use as my banner. So where is that image? Well, before this session started, I went and uploaded an image to a place. I'm going to go back to Site Actions. So what I've done is I've opened another tab in my browser. I've gone to Site Actions, and I'm going to go to View All Site Content. And this allows me to see everything that's in my Project Web App site. Document libraries, and if I scroll down, I'm going to see lists, and below that, I'm going to see all the sites that exist. So these are all the project sites, for example. But let's go back up to the top of this, because I'm looking for a document library that contains images, and here's one called Site Collection Images. This comes out of the box. And this is a handy place to put images that you want to upload or you may want to use in your site. So I'm just going to click on this. I'm going to click on View Item. So this is the banner that I'd like to put into my website, into my project site template, excuse me. So I'm just going to copy the URL. I'm just doing Control-C here to copy the URL. So I'm finished with that. I'll close this page. And back over here in my template, I'm just going to paste that URL right into that box there, and I'll click OK now. So now I have a header bar or a banner across the top of my site. Okay, that's nice. Looks a little bit prettier than it did. But what I'm really interested in is something a little bit more substantive. I want to do some more changes here. And in particular, I'd like to modify the issues list. So as it comes out of the box, if you were to create a new item for issues, you'd click Add Item, and you'd see this box here. It has title, owner, assigned to, status, category, priority, etc. All these fields. Well, a lot of my clients, and probably you as well, look at some of these and say, you know what, these aren't all interesting to us, right? category, we don't use that category field, so it's just sitting there and our users don't know what to do about it. Can we get rid of that? Yes, we can get rid of that. But also, they'll say often, well, you know what, there's some fields that I'd like to add to this. Can we do that? So let's say we want to add a field called impact. What would be the impact of this risk? Okay, so to do this, we've gone to the issues area, and what we want to do now is modify this list. Right? So issues are a kind of list, and we want to modify that. So if we look up in the menu tabs up here, we see a button called List. And when we select that, it's a big old ribbon full of stuff, but all I want to call your attention to is one button down near the right end of the ribbon called List Settings. So this is the key to being able to change your list. It brings up a page that has a lot of hyperlinks in it, but there are really only a few. Did we have a question there?
Reed, I just wanted to let the crowd know that we are recording this session so that they can review it later if everybody's trying to take notes, because you're going fast, which I understand. But just want to let everybody know we are recording this session for later review. Go ahead.
Yep, and we'll make that available on our website and maybe YouTube, huh? Okay.
And Reed, I do apologize. There is a question about, is it okay to add or delete files? But can I rename default fields? Was told not to do it. Is that more of the administrative capabilities?
Yes, that's actually a great question. It's generally a good practice with the issues and risks, or really all the built-in lists, not to change them. Okay, you might get away with changing the name. I haven't tried that, but you don't want to, for example, change the column type of any of your existing columns, and you certainly don't want to delete them. And in a moment, we're going to show you how to hide things without deleting them. I can't tell you specifically on renaming a column. I haven't done that. Actually, I have done it once and I didn't have a failure, but that doesn't mean that we wouldn't have a failure. The general guidance from Microsoft is don't mess with the built-in stuff. Don't delete anything, and don't change column types. Best I can tell you on that right now. So, what I will be showing you though is how you can kind of keep a breadcrumb trail, so that if you want to experiment with that, try it out. If it breaks things, you'll be able to go back into a previous version of your template. Okay, so I do encourage experimentation. All right, so what we want to do here is, first of all, you'll see there's a lot of general settings links up here at the top, and we're going to be playing later on with a couple of those. But right now I want to scroll down just a little bit, and I know your screen's flickering a little bit, sorry about that, and show you here are all the columns that are built into the issues list. All right, so these are the ones that come out of the box. We don't want to delete any of these, but we can add a new column. So I'm going to create a new column. Okay, and I want to create a field called impact. Okay, that just lists what is going to be the impact of this issue. And as you can see here, there's many different buttons you can choose for what kind of column or field you want this to be. The most common probably is choice. All right, and it allows us to choose from a list of items. When I click choice, a few things light up down here for additional column settings. And one is we need to enter what the choices are. So Microsoft helpfully fills in enter choice number 1, 2, and 3. Not so interesting. How about high, medium, and low for our impact choices? We can choose if we want this to be in a drop-down menu. You know what? I think radio buttons are a little bit quicker. It only takes one click. Since I'm going to want them to make just one choice, radio button works for me there. Okay. You can also select what would be your default value. Maybe we want that to be low. It automatically fills in whatever the first item you've entered is. And we want this to be in our default view. That's the view that we see in our project site. So I'll click OK here. Before I click OK, I'll mention that column validation, there's some, you can set up rules down there. We're not going to get into that today to validate entries. So what I've done now is I've created a new field, and that new field is called impact. and here it is in our list of columns. So when a user creates a new issue, they will see that impact field as something that they can make an entry to. We could make that required. I didn't call that out, but you'll see those buttons when you get into modifying those things. Now the other modification we want to do is we want to get rid of this category field. All right, so let me click on the category field and we'll take a look at it here. It says category, it's a choice, and the choices are 1, 2, and 3, very exciting. It's a drop-down menu, and if I scroll all the way down here, I'll see a delete button. Do not hit that delete button. This is a built-in field. It will let you delete it, and if you do, you're very likely to break some functionality. So if we're not going to delete it, what can we do? How can we hide it? Well, there's no hide button here. I could go to look at a view definition and take it out of a particular view. So I'm going to go to the views, and this is all views. If you've played around in project sites, you've probably seen this. This is where I can say which of all the built-in fields would I actually like to have show up in my view. And I see here, oh, here's category. I could just uncheck that and everything will be great. So let me click OK. And now I'm back to my view of issues. And here's the title, the assigned to, the status, priority, due date, and impact. And that category field is not here anymore. So I'm feeling pretty good, right? Wrong. Here's why. When a user goes to add a new item, they still see that category field. It's still there. So this form that comes up automatically displays everything that's been set to appear to the user when filling out the form. So how do we control that? Let me cancel out of this field. And once again, when we want to do things to edit a list, we go to the list, and up in our menu item here, we click the List tab. All the way down at the right end, we go to List Settings. It takes us back to this screen. And here I'm going to take you to a place called Advanced Settings. So in my General Settings, I click Advanced Settings. And the very top of the list, there's a whole bunch of stuff here we're not going to go into, but the very, very top of the list, the first item, it says Content Types. Allow management of content types. We click Yes. That's all we have to do. And click OK. So that's step one of solving our problem. Once we've checked that radio button, we get a new section in our list management page, in our list settings page, and it's called Content Types, and it has one entry in it, Project Site Issue. I'm going to click on that. When I do, I see a list of all the columns for my issue, but I see something else over here, a field called Status, Required, Optional, 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 Optional. Right? So all we're saying is you have to fill out the title, and everything else is optional. So one of those items in here is the one called Category that we don't care about. If I click on that, I now have a page that lets me set it to hidden. So it's not going to appear. It's not going to be a required field. It's just going to be hidden. That means I'm not deleting it. I'm just hiding it. And this will allow the functionality of the issues list to continue to work as expected, to integrate properly with your project plans, but not confront users with a field that has no meaning to them. Okay, so let me go back to the home page of this site that we've been editing. So at this point, we're feeling pretty good. You know, that was the main things that we wanted to do as our first pass on a custom project site template. Was we wanted to put in a banner, we wanted to add that impact field, and we wanted to get rid of the category field on our issues. So we've done all that, and we're feeling good, and we're ready to say, you know what, let's make this into a template that people can use when they create new Microsoft project schedules in Project Server. So how do we do that? Again, we go to Site Actions. Site Settings, all the way down at the bottom. This brings up a menu with a bunch of hyperlinks in it, and the place that we want to go over here is to say Save Site as Template. It's under Site Actions. So we're saying this site that we've created, it's not associated with any Microsoft project schedule. We've modified it. We're now ready to save it as a template. So I'll click on that. Now remember, this site is called Webinar Contoso 1. Just so I can, my brain can keep things straight, I like to call the template by the same name as the site on which I based it. Just makes it easier for me. So I'll call it webinar underscore Contoso1. Just makes it a little bit easier to keep track of things. The names that you use here will not appear to anyone except administrators, so you don't have to worry about making these user-friendly. You just need to make them things that you can understand and keep track of. I'm going to call out this button here called Include Content. Now, I'm not going to check that, and it doesn't really matter if I do or don't in this particular case. But imagine a circumstance where you're setting up a project site, and you want to maybe pre-populate it with some documents. Perhaps you have some standard methodology everyone has to follow, and there's 17 documents that they work through. You can pre-populate your document library. Or in the case of issues and risks, you might have a standard set of risks that should be considered for every project that's undertaken. You could pre-populate the risk list with those risk items. Now the project manager could then come in and delete the ones that are not relevant, or they could come in and modify the ones that are, but you could pre-populate that sort of data. And if you do and would like that to be part of your template, then you would click on the button that says Include Content. So I'll click OK here. It's going to process for just a moment, and it's completed successfully. So I'll click OK. So now I have a template. It's actually in Project Server that I can use. I'm going to go back to the Project Web App homepage. But how do I make Project Server use that when I create a new project schedule? For that, in Project Web App, we go to Server Settings, and we need to associate this template with an enterprise project type. Okay, so you admins are probably all familiar with enterprise project types. So here's the many different project types that I have configured for this particular instance of Project Web App. And one of them is called my Webinar Contoso project type. So I'm going to click on that. And there's a lot of definitional stuff in here, like which project detail pages are used, whether there's any workflow, et cetera, et cetera. But if you scroll all the way to the bottom, the very last choice here is what project site template are you going to use. By default, all enterprise project types use the Microsoft Project Site template, the one that we started with. But I can click the drop down here, and lo and behold, there's my Webinar Contoso 1 template. I want to use that. So I'll click OK, or Save rather, and now that's associated. So let's go back to the Project Center and see that in action. Give me just a moment here. Okay, so in the Project Center, one of the things that we can do is we can create a new project. I'll click New. I'm going to scroll down. I have a lot of project types here, so it's on the auxiliary menu all the way down here at Webinar Contoso. So I'm going to create a Webinar Contoso type of project. And for that type of project, I'll call it Webinar Contoso Example. Okay, all that's required is the name of the project. Nothing else is required. So I'm going to say OK, save. We'll watch the progress messages over here on the right. And when that's finished processing, the menu bar will light up again. And I can then click Close and check in my project. So I've now created a new project called Webinar Contoso Example, and it should have used that site template. So let me scroll down in the Project Center here. And here's my project called Webinar Contoso Example. I'll select that, and I'll click Project Site to go look at its project site. And lo and behold, everything worked as expected. So here's our Webinar Contoso Example project site. It used the template with the banner. If I go over and look at issues, I'll see the issues has that customization that was done to it. Right? And I create a new item. I can see the category isn't there anymore. Right? And if I scroll down here, I'll see here are my impact buttons that I created with default being low. Right? Okay. All right, so that's great. I've created a template for Webinar Contoso. Everybody's happy, and they're happy for about 4.5 days. And then I get a call from the HR department. And the HR department says, hey, we saw that new template that you did. It's fantastic. We love it. But you know what? We'd like to kind of have our own version because in the HR department, you know, our projects, we look at different things than you guys look at, and we're interested in customizing ours some more. So we'd like to kind of start from what you guys got and then see where we can go from there. So how do we do that? Well, we go to Site Actions, and remember when we started today, we went to New Site. So we went to New Site, and then we chose from that Microsoft Project template. Right? Remember the Microsoft Project Site template? So if we were to do that now, we'd be starting from scratch. But we don't want to start from scratch. We want to start from what was already built, the Webinar Contoso 1. Well, let's look down here and we'll see, here's the Webinar Contoso 1. So that's the template that we just created 5 minutes ago. And if we wanted to, we could start from that instead. So our starting point would include all those customizations that had already been done, like the banner and so forth. Okay, so I'm going to save a little bit of time here for presentation purposes rather than starting from there and building a lot of stuff. I'm going to kind of do the Martha Stewart thing. I've got a cake that's been in the oven for a little while. It's not completely done yet, but it's a little bit farther along. So I'm going to close out of this and show you and just pick up where we left off when we did some work behind the scenes. And here I'm going to go to View All Site Content. This is a place we were shortly before when we were seeing the site collection images. And lower down, we see all the sites and workspaces. So down here, we have one that has been worked on a little bit called Webinar HR. Here's the Webinar Contoso 1 that we worked on earlier, turned into a template. And here's the Webinar HR one that they picked up from that and did some more changes to it. Right? So they kept the banner, but then they added, here's a new list item, or a type of a new list called policy compliance. So HR is interested in making sure employees are tested on their compliance with company policy, for example. So they do some tests, and here on the 5th of February, they did a test, and 10 people passed it, and 3 failed. 2 haven't yet been tested, so we've got 87% test coverage and a pass-fail ratio of 77.23. Here they did it again on the 7th, etc. So they decided that they wanted to show this. They just put in a web part here and displayed this list item. If we look over on the left side, we'll see there are the issues and the risks, right? But then there's all these other lists that they've created as well, right? So policy compliance was one of them, and they decided that was important enough that they just added it to their home page. But let's look at some of the other things that they did as well. So, for example, they created recent accomplishments. They'd like their project managers maybe once a week to come in and create a new item, which will be automatically dated to the date they created it, and say, what did you do this week? I did a lot of great things. Fabulous accomplishment. Click Save. I've now added to that list. I can create another item. Maybe I forgot to put one in last week, so I'll put one in for the 31st of January. And 31st of January, we were just getting started organizing the team. Caps lock off. Team. Okay, and we'll save that. All right, so here they can just keep a running total, for example, of what's going on. Maybe they want to have a recovery plan, so if projects sometimes get out of shape, we could have, say, different management vectors. So let's say scope management. We've got a problem with scope management, so we need to our plan is to renegotiate the scope to get our scope back under control. All right, and I'm going to add another item. And I'm not going to type too much here, so let's just put in some gibberish because I want to show you some functionality that we're going to get to here. So I've got a risk management item. I've got an issue management item. All right, so let's say we've got issues, risks, and scope that we're actively managing on this particular project because we have some troubles in those areas. Management has said, you know what, we only want one of each of these. In other words, I don't want you to have 2 scope management items. I want you to have one thing where you're attacking scope. So if I go in here and try to create another scope item and click Save, it's going to bark at me and say, this value already exists in the list. So how did that happen? Well, what we did when we defined this list, I'll cancel here, we defined this list to say you can only have one of each of these items. And how did we do that? We went to the List tab. We went to List Settings. All right, this is familiar by now. It's our third time here. Okay, and List Settings, I scroll down and I find Management Vector, which is that field that we've been looking at. So Management Vector was assigned as a choice field, and you can see the choices here listed: risk, issues, scope, schedule, and cost management. Set it up as a drop-down. And under column validation, where are we? Oh, I can't actually show it. There it is. Okay, sorry, I went to the wrong place. So we're requiring that the column contains some information, and we're enforcing unique values. So what enforce unique values does is it says you can only have one of each of these items in the list.
Excuse me, Reed.
Useful thing.
Apologize. There's a question about the new columns you're creating and what is needed to be done to make certain that they end up in reporting, available to the reporting infrastructure. And I'm not sure if this is the right area for that or not. It might not be, and if it is,
that's okay. Yeah, that's a very good question, really. So, and it's not an easy one to answer shortly, but here's the best short answer I can give you. Reporting, whether it ends up in reporting depends on what kind of reporting you're doing. So if you are reporting, say, from the OLAP cubes, right, or from the reporting database, when you create a custom list like this in a SharePoint site, it will not show up in your project server reporting database. It is in the SharePoint content database. So if you're writing a report, you'd have to write the report against the content database. If you are simply modifying your issues or your risks, then some of that information will be in the reporting database. And what will be there are the fields that were built into Project Server. But if I add a new column, it's not going to be in my Project Server reporting database. I have to do a fancier kind of reporting if I want to, and we've done this recently, in fact, just in the past 6 weeks, where we had to pull content out of both the SharePoint reporting content database as well as the Project Server reporting database to create a consolidated project status report that had information about, say, schedule information, as well as risk information, as well as information from these custom lists. Okay, so it's a tricky thing. It's certainly possible. We did it using SQL Server reporting services. All right, best answer I can give you right now. All right, so back to this. What we did here is we enforced the unique values so that the user could only select no more than one of each of those management vectors. I'm going to click cancel here. Okay, something else that you can do that can be interesting is, so far what we've seen is every time we wanted to edit one of these lists, and let me go back to the list settings. So here we are at the recovery plan, and what we've seen so far when we want to edit is we click on list, and then we click on list settings, and we get this page, and we can do things in this page. But whatever we do here, and let me back up now again, whatever we do here, whenever I click on new item, I get a standard form, and that standard form is very simple organization. I don't get to change how this looks at all. Sometimes I want to have something that looks a little bit different, maybe a little bit better than that. So I'm going to show you an example here. In budget and cost, if I click new item, here I think this idea of this picture is this is representing sunk costs, right? Sunk dollars. So here's a form. Let me drag this up a little bit. I've got my magnification turned on, so it's a little bit bigger than it would be in real life. But here's a big illustration above the form that has like an AFE number and approval date. And here I've colored some of the items, some of the labels, right? So this is a form that looks a little bit nicer, right? How did I do that? Well, that can be done. I'm going to close this, right, by going to the list, but instead of going to list settings, you go to customize form, and this icon here is for info path. So you can use info path to customize a form, except do not use info path to modify your existing lists like issues and risks. Okay, if you try to do that, it's going to give you a little warning, and if you ignore the warning, then your issues and lists functionality will be broken. It will not integrate with your Microsoft project schedules anymore. Okay, so info path, we're not going to go in there and spend any time, but that's where you can go to make your lists, forms look a little bit nicer, but just don't use it on issues and risks. Use it on any custom lists that you create. Okay. So one other thing that I want to do here before I leave this template, all right? So we've done some modifications. We created some custom lists here. Let me go back to my home page here. Let me go back to my webinar home page. You know, we might want to change this this graphic over here. We could do that in the same way that we've done the banner. I'm running a little short on time, so I'm not going to do that right now. But I do want to show you one other important thing, and that is about this navigation area over here. So out of the box, you get libraries, you get lists, and discussions. Those are your main heading areas. And every time I've created a new list, it's shown up under this list area. But I would like to organize this just a little bit better. Okay, I'd like to have a couple new headings here. How do we do that? As usual, we go to Site Settings. And in the Site Settings area, under Look and Feel, we go to Navigation. And I'm going to scroll down. There's a lot of stuff here, but the place I want to call your attention to is this area for navigation, editing, and sorting. Okay? And here you see I have libraries, I have lists, I have discussions. Those were the main sections that were showing up. Okay? What I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new heading. I want to add a heading, and I want to call this one Outcomes. And I'll just click OK. You can put a hyperlink there if you'd like it to take you someplace else. Normally you don't really do that, but you can if you want. So what I want to do under Outcomes is I want to place some of these items here that are under lists into the Outcomes area, like Training Summary. That's kind of a project outcome. So I'm going to move this down. And it's a slow process here. Click, click, click. And now it's underneath Outcomes. And the same thing with Policy Compliance. That's really an outcome item, so I'm going to move that down. Okay, and then, you know, this thing that says Lists, I don't want it to be called Lists. I'd like that to be called Project Management. Okay, we'll click OK here. So I've changed the name of that folder to Project Management. I've moved some things down under my new Outcomes folder. I'll click OK. Let's see how this looks. Okay, so now we have Project Management here. Here's our discussions area, and here's our Outcomes area down here. Well, you know, I didn't mean to have the Outcomes down below discussions, so let's go back once more to Site Settings, Navigation, drag down, and I'll just take this whole Outcomes folder. I'll highlight that and I'll move it up. That looks better. That's what I meant to do. I'll click OK. And while I'm here, you know, I could change my site theme. Maybe I like a different color here. Let's say Construct. That's a nice color scheme. So I can change this color scheme of my template as well. Oh, that's so much better, isn't it? Don't laugh at me. All right. So now I've got my new HR site template looking the way I'd like to look, and except maybe I don't want to include this content in it, right? I might want to just leave that content out. So I want to save it as a template now. Remember how we do that? Go to Site Actions, Site Settings, save site as template, and give it a name. I'll call this webinar _HR. And I will use the same name as the template name, just so I don't confuse myself. And I will not check the box to include content. And that way those issue and risk items that I created, those other entries, they're not going to go along with the template. It'll be a blank template. So we're processing. We're successful. I'll click OK. And remember now that the other thing that we have to do in order for people to be able to use the template that we've created is that we need to associate it with an enterprise project type. So back at the Project Web App homepage, I go to Server Settings, and I go to Enterprise Project Type. And here I'll choose my Webinar HR project type that I created earlier. I'll scroll down all the way to the bottom. At the bottom, where it was using just the standard Microsoft project site template, now we'll use the Webinar HR template. I'll save that. And now I can go to the Project Center. I can click New. Go to my auxiliary flyout menu here, choose a Webinar HR type project. Fill in the name. And click Save. And that's now saved, so I'll click on Close and I'll check in my project. That'll take us back to the Project Center. I'll scroll down and find my Webinar HR example. I'll select it and then click Project Site. And there's our new project site. All right, so a couple other things that I want to show you is, first of all, how can we save a template? So let's say that, we know that it's here on Project Server, these templates are sitting there, but maybe we'd like to create a backup that's completely independent of the servers, or we may want to share our template with someone who has a different instance of Project Server. They came visiting, saw ours, liked our project site template, and would like to use it and not have to recreate their own from scratch. So you can do that. I'll click on Site Actions. Again, we go to Site Settings. And here we go to a place we haven't gone before, and it's a place called Solutions. So in Solutions, we will see listed all of our templates that we created. Now what's not showing here is the Microsoft project template that comes out of the box. That's hidden elsewhere. These are the ones that we've created. All right. So if I wanted to create a download of, let's say, the Webinar HR site, all I have to do is left-click on it. And when I do that, I'll get a little pop-up down here. Do you want this WSP site to be saved? And if I click on Save here, it's going to save down to my desktop as a little file with a WSP extension. Okay. I can then take that file and share it with somebody else, and they can then come to their web app, to their solutions library, and click the upload button and upload that file to their own solutions library. One thing I'll tell you about this is if you do copy one of these files and then install it into another farm, sometimes when they first start to use it, they will get an error message. And if you were to try that and get this particular error message, it'll be about features not installed. It's very easy to do a web search, and there's an easy solution for that. We're not going to go through it today, but it's a pretty easy solution to get that fixed. It doesn't happen all the time, but occasionally it does happen. Okay. Something else that I would like to call out is in this page here of solutions is this area called status, and we see activated, and then we see a number of them that are blank. So what this means is the ones that are activated are ones that will show up in that list when we go to the enterprise project type and choose which template we want to associate with it. Only these solutions that are activated will show up in that list. So if, for example, we decide, you know what, we want to stop using this webinar Contoso 1, right? I want to stop using that because I saw what the HR people did and I decided theirs was so great I'm going to use theirs from now on. So if I click the drop down here, I get a choice to deactivate. If I click on that, then I get a little box here. It has one choice highlighted, which is deactivate. If I click on that, it will deactivate and we'll now see over here next to Webinar Contoso is blank on the status. At this point, if I really want to get rid of it, I can open the drop down again and I now have a choice of activate it to turn it back on or delete if I really want to get rid of it. So what you may want to do here in terms of managing your templates is if you have a more updated template that you've created but you want to test it for a while, you might keep the old one around. So deactivate the old one, but don't delete it until you're sure that the new one is working, that you haven't broken some functionality. Okay, it's very important, and one area of functionality that people can break, I'm going to go back here and show you guys something here, is in the issues area, issues and risks. I'm going to click this drop down here. The status field of issues and risks has built in these choices, active, postponed, and closed, and they are preceded by these numbers 1, 2, and 3. You can change this list if you want. You can add more items to it. In fact, I saw a blog post by a Microsoft guy that showed how he had added more items to this list. But what he didn't call out was if you change 1, 2, and 3, those numbers, there is certain behavior that Project Server depends on those numbers for, and I'm going to show you what it is. When I go to my home page, my reminders area shows me I have an active issue assigned to me. I'm going to click on that. This is going to show me all the issues and risks that I have assigned to me. And see here on the Contoso standard site I have an active issue. And then I have this site called Test of Status Manager. And it shows I have a closed issue. That issue isn't really closed, actually. It's just that the user of that site renumbered their status items, right? And in this view, Project Server says whatever's numbered as number 1, no matter what you call it, that's counted as an active issue. Whatever is numbered as number 2, that'll be called postponed, and whatever is number 3 will be called closed, no matter what you call it in your drop-down list. So what I'm telling you to do is if you modify your issues or risks list and you modify the status, the list of choices for your status field, just leave active, postponed, and closed as 1, 2, and 3, and then add whatever other things you like to it. The other things you like that you add to it will show up in the reporting database. They will show up in OLAP cubes and Excel services reports that you build. But this functionality on the home page will get completely messed up and confusing if you change that numbering that exists there. Okay? All right, so let me jump back to my slideshow because that is
Reed?
Everything that I wanted. Yep.
I apologize. There is one question regarding the sites, the site templates. And the question is, the site that displays the whole portfolio, is there a template for that or is that a custom built?
Oh, that was not custom built. That comes right out of the box. So that's called the, in the web parts, that's called the Project Center web part. So you have it. It's there.
Thanks for answering that.
Yep. So back to the slideshow here, and we just have one little slide to go. So here's a few do's and don'ts, or don'ts and do's, just to refresh ourselves. So create a template from an existing project server site, not a good idea. All right. So an existing site that somebody else has created when they created their project is already associated with that particular project. And if you try to create a new template from it, it won't work. It won't be associated with any new project that's created. Don't change the column types of existing columns. It's not allowed in most cases anyway, but if you have an existing column that came out of the box, don't fool with it as far as changing it from a lookup column, say, to a calculated column or a number column. You'll break functionality. Don't delete existing columns that came out of the box. You can just hide them. We showed how you could do that by enabling content types. and then going in and selecting hidden. Don't use InfoPath to edit issues or risks. Now, this is one, if you try it, you will get a warning box. All right, so you'll probably remember it when you see the warning box, and it'll be basically warning you in the kind of code language that if you use InfoPath to edit an issue or risk, the linking that you get from issues and risks to project schedules will stop working. Don't change the number of your status choices in the issues and risks. We just talked about that. Good practice, keep a few previous versions of your templates. It's not hurting much. They're very, very small in terms of their size, unless you have a lot of content in them. So it's not like you're creating a big storage load or anything. I do like personally to number mine. I find in real life, as I'm doing this stuff, these things tend to iterate. So I'll build, a nice template. We'll use it. We'll look at it. We'll, oh, forgot to do this, and that's number 2 iteration, number 3 iteration. I just finished an engagement where our final template was number 32, I think, 30 or 32. So it's a good thing to keep them kind of numbered so you can keep track of what's what. And certainly do experiment and have some fun. SharePoint is incredibly deep. I don't know if it has a bottom to it. You can just keep diving deeper and deeper and deeper. There's lots of cool stuff in there. There's lots of web parts that are available out of the box that you can play with and manipulate in interesting ways. And remember that Site Actions button. So that button in the upper left-hand corner, that's our doorway to get into all the SharePoint functionality. So at that point, I think if there are any other questions, we could take them now. It looks like we have just a few minutes remaining.
So while we're waiting on some last-minute questions, one thing I'd like to throw out to our crowd here is if there's any topics that you would like to have us do another webinar on, please do submit that. We want to have an ongoing series so that we can make sure we're helping our customers out. And if you have any suggestions on how to make this better, please let us know that as well. Brian, do you see any additional questions at this point? I see one more coming in here. Brian, you want to read it off to us?
Sorry, thank you. I just was muted. Let's see, this question is from Mike. We create project sites with every project plan by default. The URL is made up with the project name. Can we change the work site URL after the fact?
Yes, you can. That's the short answer. Yeah, so you can go into actually probably not set up to demo that.
So I think we can. I think the brief answer is yes, you can, and if you'd like, we can get on a call with you to explain it in more detail.
Yeah, we can do a follow-up on that.
I'm going to unmute the lines real quick.
Does anybody have a question they'd like to ask if the line's unmuted?
It appears not. Hello?
I'd like to go ahead and thank everybody for their time today. Again, if you have any questions or suggestions for upcoming webinars or suggestions on how to improve things, we'd appreciate that. And I want to thank you all for your time, and we'll send you an updated list of questions that we answer as well. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.